am Dr. Joan Coleman, and the Exchange is exciting.
I'm Denise Cavalier. The Exchange is real.
I'm Carolyn Poiker. The Exchange is empowering.
I'm Donna Hutchinson. The Exchange is thought-provoking.
The Exchange, a Let Me Be Me podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Exchange podcast, a Let Me Be Me podcast. We are so excited to be here. And you know what I was thinking? The nerve of some people. But before we get into that, let's introduce our ladies.
Donna Hutchinson.
Carolyn Poiker.
Denise Cavalier.
And I am Dr. Joan Coleman. And today, ladies, we're going to talk about control. People trying to bully us, control us. We're going to talk about self-preservation. How do we just get around that? How do we preserve our own self, our own minds, our own bodies so people do not take advantage of us? Now, let's get into this conversation. I know, Donna, let me tell you, right? So I'm minding my business and I'm hearing somebody talking, and instantly my instincts say, they're talking about you. So I'm like, what? And I let it go. I don't say anything. I let it go. I let it ride. I keep, and then the second week I go back to the meeting. Same thing. I'm like, I'm pretty forgiving. But when I get home, I'm like, I'm falling apart, telling my husband, such and such said this, such and such said that, and falling apart, right? And then I go back to the meeting the following week, and it's the same thing. And I thought to myself, how do I stop this? Now, do I work on me, or do I go say something to the other person? Like what?
I think a little bit of both. No, I think there's a time for you to stand up for yourself and speak your mind and be your true authentic self. And I also think you have to work on your own self because, as we always know, the only thing we can control is ourselves. I have a big time control issue, so I try to remind myself of that often. I cannot control others. I can only control my reaction. So that's a huge thing to remember all the time. Is always I can only control that.
I don't want anybody to know that they got me like they got me when I go home and fall apart. Why? I don't want them to know that. Oh, she's falling apart. So I'm like, oh, okay, hey. Instead you're talking and I just like, okay, fine, because I do, any of you know Don Miguel Ruiz Jr.? Yes. And he says, do not be offended. Don't walk in offenses because more than likely it's more about them than you, And so, but to preserve your own self and to control your emotions and just to say, okay, Joan, it's okay. What do you guys do? Do you find yourself in any of those situations,
I think also, too, I just want to add, I think you also need to know who you can be honest with and feel and be vulnerable and who you kind of keep at a distance. There's a separation between the two. So that's a big one, too, knowing who you can be that honest with. And then I understand the idea of preserving yourself in front of everybody else who you don't want to show that vulnerability side. And that's very fair, too. So I think knowing the difference is a big thing for me.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I think it is hard because you have to make that distinction and sometimes maybe dance around that and figure out which you're going to be honest, confront them or not. But I think sometimes it's fun to kill them with kindness because you're sort of like, I know you're talking about me, but I'm going to be super nice and I'm going to just show it. It doesn't matter what you think of me and stuff. It can be kind of a little bit fun.
I kind of shut down, though. I don't want to talk to you. I mean, I shut down, right? And it's so funny because I had a dream. So the person, the same person. So I shut down. I wasn't talking. I didn't want to talk to you. Why am I going to talk to you? You don't care about me. And so I felt like that's a way to take my control back, to preserve myself, my mental, my mental, so I don't have mental problems, so that's the way I thought I could protect myself. I don't need to talk to you. So I see you, I smile, I walk by. I don't have a conversation. I'm not talking, right? But then I had a dream, and this is a real story. I had a dream, and it's kind of weird, so I hope it's not too gross for you. I was dreaming, right? And the person who I stopped talking to was sitting on a couch outside. It was like a couch, and they were just sitting outside because I could see the sun. And then I walked over, and when I looked, they looked like they were sitting in a pea. right? So I said to myself, are they sitting in pee? And I was looking, and then they called me over, and I went over, and they said, well, they said, I've noticed that you're not talking to me. Like, you've stopped talking to me, like, why have you stopped talking to me? And we're having a dialogue while, and somehow my head got on her lap, and she's wondering why I'm not talking to her anymore. And then she stood up, and the first thing my eye went to was to look to see if she peed. But she didn't pee on herself. It looked like the stain was already there. And so she's talking to somebody else. I immediately woke up. You know how something jolts you out of your dream?
Yeah.
I woke up and I looked it up. I got on my phone,
Yeah.
like, spiritual meaning of pee stain.
Yes.
And you know what it said? It says emotional negativity, and you got to let it go. If you don't let it go, it's going to leave a stain.
Oh,
Wow,
I was
that's your
going to say,
answer.
yeah, we needed a definition to that. So that was a good one.
Yeah,
Very
I
good.
immediately let it go. I prayed and I immediately let it go. And I felt 200 times better.
Well, that's a question. How do you let it go?
I prayed.
Just grace from God.
Yes.
I get you.
I prayed and I just let it go. And I just was done with it. Because I don't want anything to hinder what's for me.
Right.
And so I'm like, I'm going to be the nicest. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to speak, So let's, what do you do? Does anybody have a story?
I think I resonated with, things that all three of you had said. And first with you, Joan, that I don't want anybody to know that they got to me.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's a pride issue or whatever, but until I evaluate the situation and think a little bit more about where they might be coming from, I probably won't let them know right off the bat that whatever they said bothered me. And I'll try to take some time to process it. But I also don't hang on to offenses anymore, because I think I learned a really hard lesson where I hung on to a bitterness for a very long time. And it really is just like drinking poison.
Yeah.
So I'm learning and have learned and gotten pretty good at releasing things and really realizing that everybody has their own struggles. And so whatever they do in the moment. And it's not a lasting something against me. However, in terms of self-preservation, I probably will have a little rating scale back in my head that says maybe you ought to be careful about what you say to that person, or maybe you need to shield your energy around them and not open yourself up so much. I think we know, we meet people in our life, we connect with them, and we know that we're safe. And then there's other people, maybe not so much. So just sort of learning who we can be safe with and, keeping that in the back of my mind, but still being kind. And yeah.
That is so awesome to hear, because what about those you give chances over to again and again and again, and they keep showing you who they are? Because I heard somebody say, people show you who they are, believe them. But we're sensitive people, right?
Yes.
So we tend to forgive, and then they keep doing the same thing. So how do you? That's my problem. I want to shield myself from that. You said some beautiful things. How do you learn to not walk in offenses? Not that, when do you let it go? Because like I said, I was feeling some kind of way, and I had to have a whole dream to let it go,
Yeah, luckily I don't remember my dreams very much anymore. There's probably a reason for that. I'm probably processing a lot of stuff while I sleep, and I very seldom will remember a dream. But I think some of it just comes from, having an experience where, again, I held on to some very, very deep conflicts for a long time until I realized that it was only hurting me to hold on. And that, the person that hands us that behavior or conflict were just in that space at that time and made a bad decision, or it's not a lifelong.
Yeah.
Got to hold it. I call it my backpack. And I say I empty my backpack daily. I try to. So there's nothing in there. I'm not carrying around a bunch of garbage.
And do you agree with me? Because they're probably not even thinking about you. They're sleeping. They're having a party. They're not thinking about you. Carolyn, what's some of your stories? Tell us about how you self-preserve.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good one. So I think for me, what happens is I think I'm really good at empathy, right? And I'm really good at putting myself in this other person and going like, oh, they might have done that maybe hurt me because of this, and giving them sort of a, I don't know, an out. And so then but when you do that, then they're able to come back and do it again. And then it might take me, because I think maybe I'm a little too nice sometimes, a few more hurts before I go, oh, wait, they really have showed me, who they are. And then you need to go away. I think recently for me, though, probably my example is, I think I thought a whole bunch of people were my friends. And then it just started becoming clearer that I was seeing it differently than they were. And I was giving, and not receiving. And it just felt so imbalanced after a while. It felt like a hurt. And I was like, oh, I need to not keep putting myself, in that situation. So hopefully learning to say, like, I'm a little bit sad because I thought they were my friend, but maybe they're not, kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like, like
that does.
So I think in a way, I try not to beat myself up too much if I've allowed myself to maybe get hurt a few times, because I think it is not a bad thing to have empathy and to give people an out and give people other chances. But is a point where you have to be like, oh, no.
That's enough.
It's enough. I need to take care of me. And I think sometimes it became clear with one relationship where I needed to sort of be a little confrontational, a little bit like hurtful, honest, and say like it wasn't okay. And, and that person doesn't really want to hear that. And they just keep coming back. And I'm like, gosh, what do I have to do? Like, I really dug deep to be like, no. Yeah. But, some people don't learn and they come back and you block them on your phone.
Block them. Listen,
there's power in that.
Because you know some of those things triggers too.
Yeah.
Then you start thinking, oh, why am I so slow? Why am I so this? Why am I so that? And you start a whole thing, and it takes a long time to get rid of that attitude, to say nope. And so lately, when something goes wrong, it triggers me a negative reaction, and I have to immediately catch it and say, nope, you are great, you are wonderful, you are enough. Whatever the affirmation, I need to move past that. That's what I do,
It's so easy to fall into that insecurity pattern. We go into it, and I certainly can see myself doing it with certain people in my life. And you have to stop yourself and say, what am I doing? Why am I making a hierarchy of anyone in my life and saying they're better than me or not? Or, vice versa, putting yourself above anyone. It's always checking in with yourself and checking what old patterns, especially as women too. I think we often feel insecure by nature. Putting a stop to that and saying, I don't actually have to listen to that voice at all. And that's always very freeing when I do that. Oh, that's just my mind chattering. I don't have to pay attention to that at all. It's always a good reminder for me.
Yeah. And it's just, sometimes it's hard. And we want the people out there, the listeners, to know that, listen, those things are going to come up. Those triggers are going to come up. You're going to feel like, especially if it's like somebody who you loved, or somebody who you dated, somebody who you thought you're going to have this wonderful life with, and they hurt you, or you made the mistake of hurting them. And then you start like with all these negative, we tend to go back to where we came from, because, we don't know. We talked about childhood trauma. So some things in your life like poke at that. And so all these feelings come out. So were you able to resolve, your feelings with what happened?
Oh, with that example of when I confronted them? I mean, no, it's a work in progress, because I think there's parts of my relationship with this person that I do appreciate and want to stay. So it is kind of a little bit weird, but what it brings me to is, why am I feel like a little bit like I'm doing something that's allowing people to treat me that way.
Yeah.
Like, why am I attracting that? Like, I've been sort of pondering that too. Like, what could I do so that I'm not just getting myself in that situation? But no, it doesn't always resolve.
Oh my gosh, you said that's me. Always like, why does this always happen? Because we're like the same. we're kind of like nice people, and you just like, you're just happy people, and then people take advantage of that, and then you're thinking like, why am I doing this? Why does this always happen? Do you feel like that, Denise? Like,
oh, I'm a very empathic person and very loving person. I really care about people a lot. And so I've had, and I'm still working on like boundaries, being in balance. I don't even know that I ever really looked at that until recently, being out of balance in relationships where I'm doing all the giving. And then you get upset, like you say, when it's not returned. And so I am still working on that as well, as developing balance in my life. And also I had to look at like, why do I have to do so much giving? Why do I feel like I have to do so much giving?
I was just going to ask that question.
Yeah. Like, do I feel that I'm not I'm not valid? And I think that's part of it is I don't deserve, love returned, and I don't deserve good things or whatever. So I'm really working on that now, on my self-worth and equality, balance in relationships.
And rejection is a part of that too. When people feel rejected, I think they try to be more given, more like, here I am, let me be your friend, And so when they get rejected, then they're spiraling back to that place, right? So
yeah, I mean, also it's easy to get hurt and then shut down as well. So I think there's both sides. You either are going to like overgive and keep trying, to which my husband is always like, stop being surprised by people acting the way they've shown you exactly how they're going to act. So I stop that, or shutting down and getting hurt and going into sort of that self-preservation mode. But I wanted to say too, I was curious of your thoughts. If for me, if I see the same pattern of people over and over and over again, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a lesson here that I'm not learning yet. And I'm keeping shown these same characteristics just to kind of reel in that lesson until I decide to put that boundary and up that, new version of myself, of how I'm going to carry myself and what I'm going to allow.
I totally agree with that. There are lessons in everything. And when you go through some things, when you go through some hurts, when you go through people saying, I like you, but I don't like you, whatever it is, there is a lesson there. And sometimes you won't know what the lesson is till later down the line, like a few years from now, you're like, oh, that's why this happened. And then when we don't learn the lesson, guess what? Tends to repeat. To repeat. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to learn? And so, it's so much in self-preservation. It's so much you have to do to guard your heart. You want to guard your heart, but you don't want to shut people out, especially the ones that make the mistakes, because you got to be careful. If they make a mistake and you're like, I'm done, I'm not talking to you, then, we got to learn forgiveness in that. What do you think about that? Like learning forgiveness in self-preservation?
Yeah, I think it's very important. But I think it goes back to the patterns. If you see that pattern, then okay, this is where I need to put the brakes on here. But forgiveness is also I am very impulsive in my display of anger at times, and I'll come back and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. So I hope always people don't judge me based on those moments. We all have moments, but if people continue to show themselves as their true self that does not align with who you are and what you want in your life, then it's time.
I was just thinking, I have a good friend, and she likes to say that like God will whisper things that we need to hear, and then he'll talk louder, and then he'll yell, and then he'll bash you on the head. And so every once in a while, when I am finally seeing, I'll text her and been like, just got bashed on the head. And it's like a funny thing to think about, that the whole time the message was there, but it just took us a little while longer. But I feel like I never thought about the rejection part as being a part of this for me, because I became aware a couple of years ago that I felt like if I wasn't giving, I wasn't going to be a part of the other side of the relationship. That I always had to do more. And so I became aware of that and started working on that. But I wonder, because, I have been rejected by these two people in my life who should be very close to me. And we were for so long, since birth, really. I wonder if that's sort of playing a part of that, because that's really been for more than 10 years that I experienced that rejection and stuff. So maybe that's a part of it too. I got to think about that.
Yeah, that's a big part of sometimes of how you feel, because first thing when somebody hurts you or wants to move away from you, that's rejection. They don't want to be with you anymore. So now you're rejected and you're like, well, what do I do? Like, but how about this? Forgive yourself.
Mhm.
We talk about forgiving others. We talk about forgiving, those who hurt us, but we have to forgive ourselves, right,
Yes.
Denise?
Absolutely. I think that's really key, and forgive ourselves for our role maybe in attracting, different behaviors that we haven't really looked at it yet, and we still need to go deep. So I think self-forgiveness is really important.
When
Yeah.
I was rejected by some family members, it took me a while to realize that I actually agreed with them
Mm.
and changed because of it. And then I had to forgive myself for agreeing with them and letting myself change because I shouldn't have,
Right.
it wasn't how it should have gone, but that's how I did it. And that was so hard. But when I did, I was like, that was freeing. It's okay that you, for a couple of years, accepted that and said, oh, maybe they're right. And I didn't need to, but once I let that go, that was definitely very helpful. Forgiving
Yes.
myself for making that agreement with them,
Yeah. And you could say you changed, for someone else, but the real you is going to always come back. And I think when you forgave yourself and said, listen, what am I doing? That was the real you saying, nope, 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 not going to happen, not going to be that person. And so it's so important. And, to just have gratitude and just to forgive yourself, to take a moment. We are so busy. We always rushing, got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. And when we don't make time to stop, to breathe, and to say, listen, Joan, you're good. I love you. I forgive you for whatever you did wrong. And you keep, then you move on, right? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We had this conversation about self-preservation because I'm like, I have not been doing well in that area the last 2 months. And because I've been running around being stretched a million places, I didn't have time to take in that stock and be like, I'm okay. Everything's fine. I'm safe. Everything is okay. So I think that's a very important piece of this. It's very hard to find pockets of forgiveness of self and even time to have self-reflection when you're being pulled apart. But when you stop and start to simplify and just come back within, you really start to find those places again.
Mm-hmm. And it's not easy because things like this takes practice. That's why everybody is not okay. That's why we have a lot of mental health issues. That's why we have a lot of people just not happy, walking around like zombies, not happy, because we don't take the time to affirm ourselves. We're good people. There's good in us, but probably some kid's mom never told him that. So he grew up to think something different. But if we take a moment and if we just step back from all the chaos and the craziness and just give yourself some minutes, to say, I love you. You're good. You're enough. You're great. You deserve good things. I think that would help a little bit, and we're not counting out therapy. If you need therapy, you go to therapy, but you have to preserve your own self. You have to control what you let in, what you let affect you emotionally, that you could go on and be there and be good for somebody else, for your kids, for your daughters, for your son, And so that's what we need to do, right, Denise?
Yeah, I think, one of the problems is a lot of our negative reactions or behaviors or whatever you want to call them are really rooted in old stuff. Like they're coming from a long ways back and that, and that's why they keep popping up because it takes so much time and practice to really realize what you're doing. Sometimes we're very disconnected from the original experience or hurt or whatever causes us to behave in a certain way. So I think it's really, really takes a lot of practice and time.
Right, Denise? Carolyn, what are you thinking?
Yes, it takes a really long time. I mean, are we allowed to say how old we are?
Yeah.
I'm 51, maybe a year before the pandemic. So what's that, 3 years ago? I was interviewed for an article somebody was writing about disordered eating, emotionally disordered eating. And I made some sort of connection and I said something and she's like, do you realize what you just said? The trauma you experienced when you were 10 is when everything started. she's like, let's go back. What is this trauma when you were 10? And I was like, oh, it was like, it was little, it was nothing really. And she's like, no.
Yeah.
She's like, I think it's really there. There's something there. And I started thinking about it, and I realized it was the trauma was actually that I was told not to feel what I felt.
Mhm.
I was told that it was God's will, and it, I think it was, but as a 10-year-old, maybe that wasn't so helpful for me. Um, and so then it was like, oh, Carolyn's not allowed to feel what she feels. Carolyn's feelings are wrong. And so Carolyn spent many, many years
Mhm.
having feelings and having these are wrong feelings and all of that. And it just really it brought on this anxiety that
Yeah.
was just like insane. And it was so interesting to be like, oh my gosh, I think I can now just sort of undo all this. And thank God it doesn't take, 40 years to undo what you've put yourself through. But yeah, it's so interesting how it's just can be really deep.
Yeah, it's amazing the things that, childhood trauma plays in your life. You don't even really know it. And you just go about your day just saying stuff, walking and doing stuff. And you're wondering like, well, why do I feel like this? Why is this like this? And because somebody down in your childhood and your history told you that you're not good enough. Don't say that. Don't look that way. Fix your hair. Fix your clothes. This is how you're supposed to look. And today we want to remind you, be your authentic self.
Yes.
Just love on yourself. I know it's hard. You that's saying, well, nobody cares about me. Nobody wants to see me, do good. You have to take back that control. And the thing about self-preservation that I wanted to talk about was somebody bullying you, somebody trying to control you. You have the power to take that control back. So we want you to know that you're enough. We want you to know that you're worthy. We want you to know that you are deserving. All right. And we want you to be good. You are loved. You're loved. And if you say nobody around me, love yourself. I am Dr. Joan Coleman. I'm with Donna Hutchinson. I'm with Carolyn Poker, and I'm with Denise Cavalier. And we are the Xchange, a Let Me Be Me podcast. Go be yourself. We love you. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.